Okay.
I'm ready. No music.
No music. Okay.
No music.
And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Blast off.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ramona Speaks the Other Truth. And tonight, my guest is Michael Feeley. For those of you who don't know, Michael Feeley is a former UK police officer and now ancient code breaker and spiritual life coach who has authored 7 paperback books with others currently in writing and several ebooks on various esoteric subjects, and is also a public international conference speaker and global radio contributor. He is currently adapting his work to cater to a younger audience and will soon have a series of children's books to teach our next generation many truths that they are not being taught elsewhere. Michael has appeared on Edge Media TV, Moore Show, has featured on Strawman, The Nature of the Cage, and L Street Studios independent documentary. Michael has also appeared on America's largest radio show, Coast to Coast with George Noory, as well as on Midnight in the Desert Radio with Tim Weisenberg, Art Bell show. He also has appeared on The Other Side of Midnight radio show with Richard Hoagland and the researcher who geometrically mapped out the Sidonian city on planet Mars. Michael is a multiple paranormal UFO experiencer and has personally witnessed dimensional portals opening up just right before his eyes, emanating unorthodox craft, and has numerous UFO sightings day and night, and has seen an ET being face to face amongst many other personal close encounters of the third and other kind. Michael now uses his 17 years of evidence gathering, knowledge, and investigates training to break many ancient codes that have previously remained a mystery throughout the world. Michael, welcome to the show, and I really appreciate, because I know in the UK it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, so have at it. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, good morning, and thank you for having me.
Yes, so I'm interested in the book, The Secret Christ, or The Secret Jesus.
It's the Christ, Secret Christ. Or the
Secret Christ.
The card of Christ.
Tell me, how did that come about?
Well, it came about because I have a friend who was a member of the church, deeply member of the church, 35 years. So much so that he basically almost knew the Bible off the top of his head, having read 5 different versions of it back to front many, many times. And he sort of said, shall we get together? And I've been a part of the church. I've now seen through the teachings, and it would be nice to sort of get our heads together, because you're a Da Vinci Code type of person, and I was on the inside of the church. It would be good to join forces and write, and that's what we did. And he did a couple of chapters on the book when he goes into sort of details about his life in the church and sort of his views and things, and I complement that with sort of real Da Vinci Code exposing the secrets, and together we came up with the book. He has since challenged me for a sequel, which is that challenge is he's given me 2 scriptures from each of the books of the Bible, and has asked me to actually translate them correctly. So I'm sort of in the process of doing that, and that will be our follow-up book in terms of Christianity and different religions of the world. So that really is how that came about. He was somebody who was suggested and I sort of took the bait, and we joined forces, and sort of from the inner and the outer views, we came up with sort of a book.
So when I was listening to one of your interviews, you were discussing the entire correlation between Christianity and the pyramids. There seems to be, like, according to you, this super connection. And I'd like you to explain that to the listeners, because this is like awesome.
Yeah, what I found is the original Bible is actually the Giza Plateau. And when we look at biblical characters, when we look at biblical stories, they can be attributed to Giza in Egypt. So for argument's sake, Noah's Ark is the Great Pyramid. It is the arcane knowledge that was set on the waters of time to reach us now. When you look at Christ, Christ really is represented by the Great Pyramid, because the Great Pyramid itself represents what the Christ represents, really, which is the divine mind, the initiated soul of awareness. And that really is the Great Pyramid. Now, when you look at the likes of the Orion, which is the, what the three major pyramids are aligned to, Orion's belt, it is said that the soul comes through the Silver Gate, which is above Orion. It comes into this world from the celestial to the terrestrial. It comes into this world through the mother's womb, which is the Holy Grail. And we come into this matrix of a world through after 9 months of gestation. And the 9 months of gestation are the 9 pyramids of Giza. And this also represents the birth of Christ. Now, when you look at the 9 months of pregnancy, they are in 3 trimesters of 3 months. And that is why you have 9 pyramids in 3 sets of 3. Now, the main 3 big pyramids represent the 3rd and final trimester, when medical science tells us that consciousness comes into the child whilst in the mother's womb. So that represents consciousness. Now, when I put a map over the human head over the Great Pyramid, to my surprise, I found this correlation between the Queen's Chamber, the King's Chamber, the pituitary gland, and the pineal gland. And you also have a little tower inside, which is the Bell and Bethlehem, but it's also the jet of Osiris, which is the spine, which is the highway to enlightenment, which is Jacob's ladder. Now, when you come through the 9 months of gestation, which are the 9 pyramids, you then come out of the womb, which is represented by the gigantic sphinx, who is the lioness, the mother, the Hathor, the Isis. And you come through that, and it is said that Christ comes from the tribe of Judah. Now, tribe means breath, and Judah is a lion. So we have the lion, which is the Sphinx, and the Christ, which really, the lion's breath is a pranayama yoga breathing technique that activates enlightenment, and it also increases the internal fire. That internal fire is the Kundalini awakening, the serpent awakening, that awakens the chakra system, Noah, and it activates the mind, it activates consciousness. So the whole of the Giza Plateau represents the virgin birth of the Christ, which is the divine mind, which is the enlightened, initiated soul. So there's many such sort of stories in relation to Egypt and Moses, where Moses parted the Red Sea. What that is really telling us is the root chakra, the lower chakra, which in the Kabbalah is Egypt, which is captivity. When we go on this kind of enlightenment and we awaken this inner serpent within us, the Kundalini serpent, it goes from the root chakra to the crown chakra, which is captivity, to the promised land, the land that was promised, which is enlightenment. Now, in Gnostic circles, but that is the path of least resistance, which is known as the open sea. So that is where we get the opening of the Red Sea of the Moses story. Now, when you see Moses on Mount Sinai with the burning bush is symbolic of the fire of enlightenment of the mind. So we have all of these different sort of biblical stories. We have Egypt, where we have Kabbalah, which became the Hebrew scriptures, which became Christianity. So they all stole knowledge of the Egyptian sort of format and ethos. Now, when you look at what is the Ark of the Covenant, which is the tabernacle where God's house resides, where the Ark of the Covenant is situated, well, that is the Great Pyramid, and the Ark of the Covenant is the sarcophagus within the King's Chamber. Because when you look at the biblical size of the Ark of the Covenant, and you look at the volume of the sarcophagus within the King's Chamber, they are an exact match. So what we have is the Ark of the Covenant, where God puts his message inside the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid, which represents the pineal gland, which is our enlightenment. So the whole of the ethos of Christianity and all different religions that stemmed from Egypt, even Christianity stems from Egypt, because that is where the original stories were held.
Wow. How did you come to all of this? I mean, where did putting this together come from?
It's come over many years, and as you said in the beginning, in the introduction, I was an investigator. I was a police officer for 17 years. I went to crime scenes and I studied the evidence. I looked at the evidence and I pieced the evidence together. Now, sometimes the physical evidence is contradictory to what people are telling you happened, and you go with the evidence and you piece that evidence together. And when you know how to do that, then you can also piece together the evidence of the ancient world, the evidence of Christianity, the evidence of all of these different religions that really stem from the same place. So what I've been able to do is do a complete blueprint of the whole of the ancient world. And originally, when I looked into them, I went into them as completely independent civilizations. And then I found that every one of them were talking about the same thing. Every one of them were displaying the same mathematics that were indicating longitude and latitude coordinates of their own monuments, but also how to find other monuments on Earth and beyond Earth as well. So it was quite apparent to me that they were all singing from the same hymn sheet. They were all talking about enlightenment, the self, the rebirth of self, the resurrection of self. Because when we are born here, we are born into an initiation sphere, which is the earth plane. And we have a chance through living here to increase our spiritual maturity. And through certain rituals, through certain practices, through certain knowledge and the hunt for knowledge, we actually raise our vibrations. So when we leave this world, we enter into a different density degree, which is a different frequency and vibration. And we exist in a compatible frequency. So if you raise your spiritual maturity while you are here, then you're not coming back here because you will not be compatible with its vibrations and earth's vibrations. So it's a long and arduous task of piecing all these things together. It's looking at the evidence. It's comparing what the Sumerians were saying, the Babylonians were saying, the Greeks were saying, the Egyptians were saying, the Kabbalah were saying, the Gnostics are saying, the alchemists, the magicians. All of the gods that we are worshipping on Earth are either 2, 3, or 4-fold magic formulas. And they are used in certain sequences, with certain frequencies, to evoke manifestations of deities, of beings from other worlds. Now, the ancients were creating magic, sacred space in order for these deities to come into this world. Now, those geometric shapes that were used to create these magic spaces were the triangles and the circle. Now, when you look at every single monument or monolith of Earth and beyond, they are either a triangle, a pyramid, or they are a circular set of monoliths like Stonehenge. So they were creating safe spaces to evoke various deities. So when you look at the likes of, Yahweh and Jehovah, which is really a tetragrammaton, 4 letters, we expanded on that when we introduced vowels in order for us to pronounce that word. But when you look at Jehovah and Yahweh, which is the Hebrew and Latin equivalent, that is a magic formula. When you look at the word God actually means the 4 elements. Now you have the G, which is water, O, which is earth, D, which is fire, and we are told that God creates by breath, which is air. So you have the 4 elements in the word God. Now, in order to be divine on earth, we need to control the 4 elements within us: the fire, the water, the earth, the air. Fire, obviously heat; water, emotions; air, thoughts; earth, body. So then you then go into the geometry of the pentagram, and the pentagram is the sacred symbol of the mysteries, because the number 10 is considered the whole of creation. Man, who is the microcosm, the miniature universe, is completed by the number 5, which is the pentagram. The pentagram contains the 4 elements, and the 5th element, the ether, which is the point at the top, the ascent. So when we control our emotions, when we control the 4 elements within us, we become completed man, we become the number 5. And when we see the Christ giving us the symbol, that is the symbol of the pentagram. So it is telling us it is the completed man. When we see the Inri above the cross, that is the master of the elements. So all of these things that we are worshipping the gods are really magic formulas that come from Egypt. And it was a long and arduous process to piece all of this together from all the different cultures and put it together. You know, the heads of Easter Island, Atlantis, Lemuria, the Egyptians, the Sumerians, the Babylonians, the Vatican, Christianity, all of it is the same ethos, it is the same message.
So what would be your definition then of the universe, and how is it like computer software binary code?
My definition of the universe is that the creator is a mathematical mind, supreme mathematical mind, computerized mind, almost like a central processing unit. And when nothing becomes something, you get 0 and 1. Now 0 and 1 are the numbers of binary code, computer binary code. So there are only 2 binary numbers, but every number has a binary code. So nothing becomes something, 0 becomes 1, which becomes duality. Now, when you look at the universal wave, when you see the rise, it is positive, the dip, negative, the rise, positive, the dip, negative. It's basically a wave particle duality. Everything is duality. Now, in order for this central processing unit to speak back to itself and relay back to itself, because if you take the word alone, it gives you all 1. So oneness is also loneliness. But in order to speak back to yourself, in order to spread out across the universe and transmit information back to yourself, you have to fragment. Now, everything in the universe is a fragmentation of the original central processing unit, but everything in the universe is also a binary code. It is a binary choice, yes or no. Do I or don't I? Shall I go out? Shall I stay in? Do I choose good over evil? That is binary choice, because good is 1, evil is 0, positive, negative. Even gravity. Now, gravity, when you drop something, it becomes a negative force, it becomes 0 because it falls. When you use some effort and you pick up that object, it becomes a positive force, the number 1. Now, in between those 2 states, when you reach an equilibrium, you get 0 energy, which is free energy, which is then takes you into Nikola Tesla and different scientific experiments that he did. But everything in the universe is a binary code, including gravity, including consciousness, including thoughts, including the Bible, which is a binary choice for man. It is ultimately 2 choices, do I or don't I? And the whole of reality is a computer software that appears to be real. Now, I've physically seen with my eyes clouds turn into numbers. I've seen pulsating grids coming from the moon. So this reality is not what we believe it to be. This reality is what the 5 senses, the 5 wounds of Christ, are giving to the brain, that then creates a familiar world. So we never actually see what is beyond that familiar world. And the whole of this reality, it appears to be solid, it appears to be real, but in essence, it is computer software that gives the appearance of being real. Nothing is solid, there is no distance. Space is not empty, space is full. So consider it storage space in computer terms. So that is really how I came across the creator being a central processing unit, a supreme computerized mind. And when you look at the ancient monoliths and monuments, and millions of people around the world are asking the question of who built them, well, look no further than the central computerized mind, because within these monuments and monoliths, there is extreme advanced mathematics, but there is also a message for humanity within them. So these monuments, and the Great Pyramid is the epicenter of all of them, it was created by the universal creator.
So what would be your definition of God in all of this, and how it relates to humans and mankind, and why their perception of God is so different?
Well, humanity's perception of God is a perception that's been given to them. It's a perception and a program that's been given to them by the likes of the Church of Rome, the likes of religious leaders, the likes of, the ancient priests. Now, when you look at the word priest, it comes from the word nagush, which comes from the word magi, which is magician. So the early priests were magicians. So when you look at what I was saying about the names of the gods that we worship are magic formulas. They are nothing more than magic formulas. So the image of God, the perception of God that we have is one that has been given to us. So my definition of what God really is, as I say, the word God is really the four elements, which is within us, which is within the whole of creation. But the true creator is a mathematical mind. Everything was created in that mathematical mind, and everything adheres to a mathematical sequence. Everything in this universe, everything in this creation follows a mathematical pattern that it never goes away from. It always adheres to that mathematical pattern. It always adheres to the absolute determinism of cycles, which are set in motion so that the creator has little need for any intervention. So my definition of who is God, who is the creator, it is a supreme mathematician, supreme mathematical mind that is able to manifest by thought, manifest through sound, manifest through voice. And when you look at, why is the sky light blue in the day? Because when you use the letter A within the G major tone, it gives you light blue. D gives you dark, U gives you dark blue. So all of these colours that we see in our voice activated letterings and sequences of letterings, evoking colours, evoking magnetic fields, emoting all of these different things that we see as reality. So that the true creator is a mathematical supreme mind.
Wow. So how do we humans reach divinity while we're on Earth? How do we get to that level?
Well, in order to communicate with that, and again, we have the likes of hieroglyphs, Nazca lines, crop circles, which are really high-level spiritual communications. How do we reach divinity? Well, God, the word God, the four elements, we must control the four elements within us. So if we are constantly angry, then the fire element is out of balance. If we are always in tears, if we are always sad, the element of water is out of balance. If we are always having nasty thoughts, then the air element is out of balance. If we don't look after our body, physical body, then the earth element is out of balance. So how do we become divine on earth? We master the four elements, we create balance within. That then makes us the God-man, the union with God. That then becomes the Godhead, which is divinity. So we have to control and balance the elements, creation within us. And that is how we do it, by creating, balancing the four elements. When you see Mr. Spock on Star Trek, and he came up with the phrase, "I'm in control of my emotions," that is divinity. And that is how we reach divinity, and we connect to the God force. When we look at the word self, the two middle letters of the word self is El, which is God. It is the God within. Now, a lot of people on this planet at the moment are really at an earth spiritual maturity. They only have one sphere of reference, which is the earth plane. Those who have the higher facts, those who realize that beyond the horizon, the unseen, there are many spheres of manifestations around them. Now, when you look at the word Elohim, Ohim or Holam means beyond the horizon. El is God. So those who go beyond the horizon into the unseen, and they realize that there are other realities, they are the true Elohim, not the ones who are, well, Earth is the only existence, humanity, people are the only existence in the universe, because that is really a lack of spiritual maturity. That is the lowest levels of development. So the Elohim are those who realize that there is more to existence. But going back to the questions, how do we create divinity within? We control creation within, which are the four elements.
We seem to be so far behind as human beings with the knowledge that the ancients held. It seems like they were closer to divinity than we are.
They were. And when you look at what we believe to be modern day science, which is really an ancient knowledge, which is nothing new. You know, the new things that the physics are coming up with now are nothing new because it was practiced many, many thousands of years ago. Now, the ancients knew about DNA. They knew how to create portals. They knew how to open stargates. They knew how to transmute themselves. They knew how to escape the birth and death cycle of torment of the planet. They knew a lot of things that we are nowhere near knowing, because really, we have too many captains steering the ship the wrong direction. We have science that keeps us boxed in, saying, you know, there's no such thing as the afterlife. You know, you live, you work, you pay tax, you die. Science is taking us down the wrong path, and you know, the likes of Einstein and Newton and all these scientists who are seen as genius within the science realm, their equations were wrong on the basis that their starting point of mathematics were wrong. They should have started from zero, which is everything. Zero energy is everything. And if they'd have started with that mathematical formula, then they would have had a completely different answer. So science is taking us the wrong place. Religion is taking us in the wrong place. Teachers are giving us a false history. Everything is really geared towards keeping humanity in the lower levels of development. Now, when you see the likes of the washing of feet in the Bible, Christ washing the feet, or disciples washing the feet of Christ, that is telling us that everyone begins their development at the lowest sphere, which is the earth, which is represented by the feet. And many people are not developing beyond the first stage, which is the earth plane. So we are deliberately so in many respects. We are kept at the initial stage of development and never allowed to get any further. The only way we get any further in this world is if you take the time, make the effort to actually find out the truth and stop believing what you're being told. That is how we will escape the falsity of our reality.
How can you get to that point where you can stop believing everything you've been told? Because then you have to wonder, well, who can I believe? What can I believe? Where do I start?
Yeah, I mean, the first place to start is obviously a conscious intent. You know, from the age of 6, 7, and 8, I used to have adult conversations with myself about this world seeming backwards, this world not seeming right. And that obviously lived, but now I have the evidence as to why that is not right and why it is backwards. People have to make a conscious choice. You know, we can switch on the news. Every one of us can switch on the news at night, mainstream news, CNN, Fox News, BBC, whatever, and we can sit there and we can believe it. Or we can sit there and say, that is not true. I'm not going to believe it. I will switch it off and I will research myself. Everybody has, again, that comes back to binary choice. Do you believe it or don't? Do you watch it or don't you? Do you believe their research or do you do your own? That is your binary choice, and that is your conscious choice. So if people turn around and start saying, I'm going to question everything, I'm going to look into these things myself, that I appreciate takes a little bit more mental maturity, a little bit more spiritual maturity in which to make that decision. But when you do make that decision and you start questioning everything, then you automatically start coming into the answers. You automatically start realizing that things are not making sense. The way in which the world is, the way in which history is telling me, history tells me that Christopher Columbus found the Americas. He didn't, and that is documented in the architecture of Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland. That Christopher Columbus did not find the Americas, but yet in school I was taught that he did. And all of these different falsities, we need to basically become adults, become spiritually mature, and start to want to know the truth. And when you start making those conscious decisions, that is when the truth will come to you. It won't come to you until you make those conscious decisions for yourself.
And it seems like we need to start making those conscious decisions while we have information and research capabilities in front of us. When it comes to that, and even when you do your research, half of the people are not going to understand what they're reading. So it seems like we have to backpedal and then say, okay, now how do I gain a tool of discernment or understanding the ability to discern between truth and misinformation? How do I reach inside myself to bring out that capability that personally I believe we all possess? It's just a matter of tapping into it.
It is. There are many symbols in the public domain that people who held onto the secret knowledge are expressing in order to tell us that we are not getting the truth. How many times do you see celebrities and movie stars doing this, covering their one eye?
Yeah.
You see, two eyes represent the light that gives us both distance and direction. So in other words, light is seen as truth because it allows us to see. So the two eyes represent the whole truth. So when you get celebrities doing this and other people doing this, they are telling us that we're only getting half truth. Now, half truth is deception mixed with truth to make it extremely difficult to actually discern what is going on. So unless the individual wishes to challenge, to question, to take the time and effort to look into these things for themselves, or watch shows such as this where people who you have on as guests have done that work for them, then they will remain at the first stage of development, which is the earth sphere, until they are ready. And at some point, we all carry, you're right, we all carry this knowledge within us. We all have this potential within us. It's just that it's just been stifled. It's just been cut out. It's been programmed out of us. So until people take the individual decision that they wish to look into things and question things and not take everything at face value, just because Fox News and CNN and the BBC tell you that this is how it is, well, it may not be that way. It most certainly definitely is not that way. So you need to make that conscious decision for your own development, for your own spiritual maturity, in order to advance yourself. Now, the more and more people that do this, and luckily there are more and more people who are doing this, that is raising not only them, but is helping everybody else. And it is taking themselves from the first stage of development, where the majority, unfortunately, will remain for some time.
Wow. And all of that comes with that, to me, would lead to raising your vibration. You know, the more truth that you see and understand, and it's important to understand it also. I think
It is. It is. And when you, again, when you look at the word true, it is the same family as the word tree. And that is why, trees are sacred in Druidism, which means know about trees. When you look at a tree and you see the bark and the branches, the part of the tree that you cannot see are the roots. It is the unseen. So the roots of a tree represent the mysteries, the secret mysteries. So when someone comes along and calls you a blasphemer, the word blasphemer or blaspheme in Hebrew means to uproot. So in other words, if you are a blasphemer, you are uprooting secret knowledge and taking it from the unseen into the seen world. So that is all you are as a blasphemer. You are exposing secret and hidden and secret knowledge. So the more and more people that do that, the more of this knowledge will be in the public arena for people to decipher and to discern, which is the true knowledge. And as I say, true, tree, upright. Now, light travels in a straight line. So the truth is basically seen as a straight line. And that's where you get the phrase, I couldn't get a straight answer, because light will travel from A to B unless there's a force that bends it or obstructs it. So truth comes into the eyes. It enables us to see. So the light is seen as the truth, and that is the straight lines, and the two eyes are there to take in the whole of the truth. So people have to take a grip of their lives, take a grip of their reality, and start challenging the information that they are given, which is false information.
and not run with the masses necessarily, because to some people they think that if the masses are believing it, or whoever is screaming the loudest, then that must be it. But that's not necessarily what's going on.
The masses, really, if you imagine, a photocopy machine, and every piece of paper is just printing off the exact same, just a copy, a copy, a copy, a copy. And that is what humanity has become, it's just a copy of everything else. So when you start to get a nice, piece of yellow or orange or pink paper amongst that, black and white, boring black and white, then it gets noticed. And, society does its best to make you black and white like the rest of the photocopying papers. But just because the masses believe or are told what to believe en masse doesn't mean to say that that is correct. And it isn't correct. It's a formulated opinion. It is a history that is formulated by the writers and the victors. It doesn't mean to say that that necessarily is what happened, but that is what is accepted as historical fact. So just because the masses, just because billions of people around the world now believe the Pope, or believe Jehovah is God, or believe Christ existed, doesn't mean to say that that is correct. It just means to say that that is what they believe to be correct, because that is what they've been told is the truth.
What? How? I don't know how to say it, but what I'm thinking is, did something happen to knock humanity back to the base stage, as if, like they had this knowledge and then all of a sudden maybe they misused it or whatever, or were punished or fell into a situation where they were back to square one?
I think what has happened is there was a plan for humanity. Now, when you take humanity and its potential, human genetics were not programmed on Earth. Now, Russian scientists and different scientists from the East are now saying that human DNA was not programmed on Earth, it was programmed elsewhere. Within our DNA, there are many, many sequences of letters, of sentences, of messages. And when you look at the human physical body, that is the dust of an exploding star in the Orion Nebula, which through its death creates carbon and creates oxygen, which is what the human body is predominantly made of. So the body is not from here, and our DNA was programmed elsewhere. That means that we are not from Earth. We just ended up here, and other races, shall we say, other beings ended up in different star systems. What has happened, or what I think has happened, is there was a plan, and that plan has been hijacked. And if you imagine that there's a grid that was on the Earth as an original plan, now humanity would reach this stage in the year, whatever, and so on. Some force, some malevolent force has come along and put their grid on top of that one, and they have hijacked where humanity is and where humanity is going. And where humanity is going is round and round in circles in the same hamster wheel. Mm-hmm. And they are never getting out of that hamster wheel. And even in physical death, there are, shall we say, false lights that are put around this grid that entice souls into them, but they're being harnessed to be thrown back into the birth and death cycle of this lower reality. So something has come along and has manipulated the grid and put their own grid over the top of it, which is keeping humanity completely under control. A lot of these malevolent entities are sort of lower astral entities, and many of them are created by the lower force of man in any case. But there are some powers out there that are really keeping us in that hamster wheel. And that is why everything in society, everything in this world, everything in our reality is always at a low vibration. Every time you switch on the news or read a newspaper, it is bad news. There's always sadness, there's always, low vibration, there's always everything that is keeping us in the docile, humdrum, low density. And that is by complete manipulation and by complete intention. And when you start to realize this, then you are able to start making moves to escape this. But if you never know that you're in a hamster wheel, you don't know how to get off. And that really is where we are in terms of programming and people being told this is the truth, this is what you must believe. If you are from a Muslim country, then you must believe this. If you're from a Christian country, you must believe this. If you're from a Jewish state, you must believe this. And what people are being told to believe is really to focus on one thing, which becomes their prison, which then becomes their hamster wheel, but they forever and ever and ever just keep going in a cycle of torment.
Wow. I went off this hamster wheel. I've been saying
that's where it starts.
Since I was 16.
Because that's where it starts. I mean, first of all, you need to realize that there is a hamster wheel. And secondly, you must realize that you are on that wheel. And then thirdly, you can start making efforts to step off it. But it all comes from, if you imagine a prison with no bars, then people don't believe that they're in a prison. Because right. There's nothing, nothing compatible with what their images of a prison is. But in reality, we are all imprisoned because we are all controlled. And whether that's by government, whether that's by laws, whether that's by something that's been taken away, we are really not free. People believe that, they can get in the car and get to Walmart and that is freedom. That's not freedom, that's a privilege that can be taken away from you. And the events of the last 12 months or so have proven that fact, that as soon as somebody in authority goes, your freedom is gone. And really we never had freedom. We have the illusion that we're free, but we're not free. We've never been free.
Right. Because I remember telling a therapist at the age of 16, I said, I just want off. I didn't call it a hamster wheel. I called it the merry-go-round. I said, this merry-go-round is just going. 50 years from now, which would have been last year. I said, 50 years from now, it's going to be even worse than it is today because people are missing something. And I couldn't really explain it, but he understood. And here it is 50 years later. And it's exactly what exactly. And so my thing is, at what point will eyes be open to understand how manipulated and how ridiculous everything that we've been told to believe in, the negative, the positive, whatever. It's just this ridiculousness, a way to control us. And who is it that's doing it?
Well, who's doing it are largely malevolent interdimensional forces that are really at the top of the tree, but they are using earthly authoritarians in which to carry out their plan, really. And that can sometimes be hard to take and hard to believe. But if you imagine that, if you turn around and say, well, why would humans do this to humans? Why would humans want to destroy their host planet? That's because they're not human. And then it starts to make a little bit more sense.
Oh my God, yes.
Because we are really, really well and truly under a malevolent force. And whatever you wish to call that, we are well and truly under their control with their plan. And their plan is what we are seeing unfolding now, which is the complete surveillance and the complete control of the whole of humanity. And that is really what we now have, or we're certainly very, very close to having their full plan. But when you look at some of the coded messages, when you look at some of the information that has come to us now from a golden age, a previous golden age, then when I said at the beginning that the real Noah's Ark was the Great Pyramid, now the Great Pyramid contains sacred information that was almost encrypted as if it was a time capsule of knowledge. Now, when you look at star codes that were taken by Jewish mystics from Egypt, and they were encrypted within the Hebrew calendar, which was hidden in the Dead Sea Scrolls, that were taken by the Knights Templar and were hidden, which I have found and located in Roslin Chapel in Scotland. It tells you that on the 17th 360-year cycle of the Hebrew calendar, humanity will start to become awakened. Now, that is now. So if you imagine that many, many thousands of years ago, and I've also dated the Great Pyramid based on these star codes, which is, you just would not believe how wrong mainstream Egyptologists are in relation to the age of this monument. But based on these star codes, you're looking at just under 74,000 years old, the Great Pyramid, based on the 360-year cycles and so on and so on. So some force, some benevolent force, encrypted information that long ago in order for it to be set and to be timed to be re-emerged at a time when they believed it would, the knowledge would stand the greatest chance of succeeding. That time is now. So even though we seem to be in a dark age of control, everything is determined. You can stand there, you can be as powerful as you want, or believe to be as powerful as you want, but you're not going to stop the cycles of the seasons. You're not going to stop the stars moving a certain way each day and night. You're not going to stop the constellations moving throughout the procession of the equinox. You're not going to stop the great ages of the cosmos changing from one to the other. Now, these are the biblical end days, which are the changes of the age. So when we see the changing of these ages, with that comes a lot of destruction, devastation, financial institutions collapsing, and so on and so on. So the biblical end days is really the changing of an age. And regardless of how powerful these beings think they are, they cannot change that. They cannot change the celestial narrative. What they can try and do is manipulate it, and they can try and give a false impression of what is happening, but they can't change what is happening. So when you look at the dynamic effect of the universe, where you have to have low vibration, high vibration, etc., as a duality, when the planet and its people go through a low vibrational part of space, then we go through a dark age, an age of ignorance. When we come through a region of space which is of higher vibration, then we go through a so-called golden age, an age of light, an age of knowledge. So we are now obviously in the age of darkness, but at some point we will come out. We will come out of that back into the golden age again, a golden world, a light, a knowledgeable place. And even with the age of Aquarius comes the age of knowledge, whereas the age of Pisces was the age of belief. The age of Aquarius is the age of I want to know. So we are making that transition, and regardless of how bad it seems, what we are seeing now in the world is the last desperate attempt for these malevolent forces to cling on to control.
Mm-hmm.
And we are really seeing the rat caught in the corner fighting. That's what we're seeing at the moment. So, we've got some bad times to come, but we are going to come out of this, and we are going to come out of this better for it, because it has been ordained, it has been written in stone, it has been written in the Christ on earth, which is the Great Pyramid.
Let's talk about harmonic keys. Keys of Solomon, key of David, keys of Enoch. I learned about those maybe when I was 18, so that would be about 60 years ago. And what I want to ask you is, are the original keys the ones that are in the British Museum and in the hands of a powerful 2 or 3?
Well, the keys are harmonic keys, so they are still in place. Now, when you look at, I sometimes do group tours, and I host group tours, and go to certain sacred sites and do a face-to-face in-field talk about what the monuments are for and what they represent. When I went to the centre of Stonehenge with a group, now my co-host had no idea she was going to do this, but she just, almost in a trance-like state, walked even deeper into the centre of Stonehenge and began to use tonal rolls. Now, tonal rolls are basically multiple harmonics of the voice. Now, when she started doing this, she made the whole circle of Stonehenge reverberate and sing.
Oh.
And the power was magnificent. Now, this is somebody who, not being disrespectful, is a complete amateur. When you had the likes of the ancient masters of sound, they were able to open stargates by voice activation. So when you start looking at the likes of the key of David, the key of David is 444 hertz that relates to 528 hertz, which is known as the miracle tone. Now, when you look at what are the 64 keys of Enoch, well, the 64 keys of Enoch is a grid the Giza Plateau sits upon. Now, it's an 8 by 8 grid. Now, when you times 8 by 8, it equals 64. So those are the true 64 keys of Enoch. Now, when you look in the Egyptian language, when you look at the phoenix on the flames, which represents the enlightenment of rebirth, phoenix in Egyptian is Pahanok, which means the house of Enoch. So Enoch is the 64 keys of Enoch is the 8 by 8 grid that Giza stands upon. Now, when you reach the 64th note, which is the hemi-demi-semi-quaver, with the right tone, with the right frequency, you open up a stargate. The whole of the Giza Plateau opens up to a stargate. And that could be 32 people with 2 keys, that could be 64 people with 1 key. But nevertheless, there are 64 keys. Now, when you reach the correct harmonic tone, you open up the gateways. And they were doing that by frequencies. So the actual keys are harmonic keys. So regardless of what's at the British Museum, the keys are still in place. They just need to be activated by the right tonal frequencies.
Okay, is that, so would you equate the Buddhist prayers. You know, when I walked a temple once and heard that sounded like but they were actually saying a prayer. They weren't just saying but those words that came together made that universal sound of which I've used to in my healing um when I'd heal my and stuff. Is that the same thing?
It's the same kind of thing, because again, it's a voice key, it's a voice harmonic. You know, with om, the wave frequency of the word om is 7.23 centimeters. Now, when you look at the distance between the human chakras, they are 7.23 centimeters apart. So the word om also activates the internal chakra system, which is fragments of your soul. The word om is meant to be the original sound of the creation of the universe. And when you look at the word universe, it's one verse. Verse means metrical rhythm, which means music and mathematics. So, you know, when we look at the word him, H-I-M, it means sound. So when we look at the word him, H-Y-M-N, it comes from the word hymen. Now, the voice develops in the womb. When you go into a church, you are walking through the chakra system. When you exit a church, you are symbolically rebirthing yourself. Now, when you look at how all the concrete and all the pillars and everything inside a church is situated, it is situated for the best harmonic precision. When you look at some of the beautiful geometric shapes of stained glass windows, that is the sound of the environment. When you look at beautiful snowflakes, the geometry of a snowflake is the sound of the environment. When you look at beautiful crop circles, that is transmitted sound into the environment. So certain frequencies create certain shapes, and we are geometric. We respond to sound. You know, even the word sun is sonic, is sound. So everything in the universe is also sound, and the mystics believe that things were created by certain frequencies and certain vibrations of sound. And when you start getting the chants and all these different things at the correct frequency in the correct sequence, again, it's that magic formula, you know, the twofold, threefold, fourfold magic formula, which is 2 letters, 3 letters, 4 letters of God's names or different names. So it all connects to the same kind of vibratory harmonics, where the masters of sound were able to transmute. They were able to transmute through piezoelectric effects, magnetic energy into light energy, electric energy. And they were able to open stargates just based on sound in their voice. Now, when we, you know, the voice and sound is extremely important, because we use the 5th chakra in order to speak. Now, inside that 5th chakra, the throat chakra, is the Adam's apple. So when we misuse that speech, then it is the fall of man. It is the apple of Eden. So we can either bring in the divine knowledge, or we can destroy somebody with the organ of no bones, which is the tongue, which is the voice. So all of these ancient chants, you know, the chants of the church that was changed by the Church of Rome with the Gregorian chants to diminish the sanctity of the sound. It is all to do with sound. It is all to do with harmonics, which is the balance of all. So would fit perfectly into that ethos.
Is it possible for a person to accidentally use a sound frequency to open a portal?
Yes. The problem when you engage in such rituals, you know, you need to be at the top of your game. You need to understand what you are doing, and you need to understand exactly that once you've done this, if you do open a portal for whatever reason, you must also close that portal. Now you see so many, so-called spiritual groups who take dowsers and go to Glastonbury and go to different places around the world, and they're doing all of these rituals that they don't understand, and they're actually having more of a detrimental effect than they are a positive effect, because they don't understand what they're doing. If you don't understand something, then you learn before you do it, because that is then an irresponsibility that has put us in a partial mess. And a lot of the reason that some of this sacred information was hidden and kept from us is because we are nowhere near spiritually mature enough to have this kind of power, because it is a really, really extreme power. Now, when you understand what you are doing and you can actually evoke deities from other worlds into yours, that you can control them in your space and you can create the environment in which to keep them in, then that is a real, real creative power. You are then start talking of, almost a level of creation itself. And people who don't understand what they're doing, they're causing havoc. They really are causing havoc. And again, that comes from a complete immaturity and this complete misunderstanding of the powers that we really do possess. So yes, it is possible. I've seen people open up portals doing silly things, and they haven't closed those portals up, which means it's an open doorway for things to come into this world. So it does take a real responsibility to do these things and learn what you are doing before you do it.
That is interesting, because if you look at different cultures around the world, how they use sound in their rituals or whatever it may be, without the knowledge that it put in the way that we're talking about it now, but they have used this for thousands of years. You look at the indigenous people of Australia and how they communicated over 1,000 with the sound. And we can look at how music affects us in different ways. And I'm wondering, having thinking about all of that, is it possible that those different frequencies not necessarily open up portals, but the different music and the way it affects us, could that sound or that combination of notes bring forth entities?
Yes, is the simple answer. Because there's many different ways. As I said, there's there's the sacred shapes, which is triangles and circles, that are a compatible environment for these things to come into. Now, for argument's sake, higher entities would need lighter colours. Lower entities need darker colours in which to exist. When you get certain letter sequences, certain harmonics of those letters, it is almost like, when you get a security safe and you're typing in a PIN number and different things, that is a harmonic PIN number in which you are opening portals, opening gateways. I've seen things coming through gateways. I've seen things coming through portals in the sky. Mirrors are windows into different realities. So when we look at a mirror to do our hair, not necessarily me, but when we look into mirrors to do our hair and we're looking at ourselves, looking back at ourselves, mirrors really are an ancient way to create gateways, to create portals, and things can actually come through mirrors. And I've seen that happen as well. I have personal experience of the things that I'm talking about. So there are so many different ways in which you can come in through into different realities, into different dimensions, and you can exist in between the dimensions, in between the realities. Now, for argument's sake, why do predominantly UFOs, when you see UFOs making these fantastic maneuvers, they're usually at 90 degrees, because if you wish to shift from reality to reality or dimension to dimension, you do in 90-degree angles. Now, the fourth dimension is it's a 90-degree angle from the third. You know, when you get Masonic rituals, the rising, it's always done at 90 degrees. When you look at like the Knights of Malta or the cross within the circle, it is at 90-degree angles. So the 90 degrees of separation takes you from different dimensions to different realities. There's so many different ways in which they can come in and things can come out. And largely that is also done by frequency.
Could I was thinking, like, with disease and things, could we use that conversion to shatter that, to lessen it, to get rid of it? Because I just had this idea. I said, too bad we all at the same time around the world couldn't, you know, do some kind of harmonic thing that would just blast this virus in oblivion, or if nothing else, weaken it. Because it seems like, I don't know, I just had a thought that it was multiplying because of all the negative and chaotic energies and the anger and, you know, all this that's going around is what's keeping it growing instead of dying off. I mean, is that a possibility, or could it be used in that way?
Again, every part of the body has its own frequency, and when a part of the body, for whatever reason, its frequency begins to diminish and start getting lower and lower and lower, that is when we see physical manifestations of disease. It is highly possible to take harmonics and to take frequencies, beam them at certain regions of the body, and kill infected areas without harming healthy cells, and that is just by sound. Sound can destroy, sound can elevate, and again, the force is just the force, it's how you use it. But yes, it is highly possible, and it is possible that you can beam sound into certain locations and sort things out. So your thought is perfectly right, and that is, we say, I'm sure that is a form of medicine that is used in other places.
Yeah, because it seems like the only thing at this time that will actually do any good. That's just amazing. It's amazing the things that you've thought about all of your life and then kept to yourself, and then suddenly years later, here it is being discussed. So you realize that you're not the only one that was along that path, although you're a lot further up the path, and I'm kind of pulling your coattails back a little bit. But it's just amazing what's going on around us that we're so oblivious to, and what we are focused on that does us no good. It's just amazing how distracted we are as energy spiritual beings. That
well, there's more happening in the unseen than there is in the seen.
yes.
If you imagine that as human beings, we think that we know a lot, we see a lot, we feel a lot, we smell a lot, we hear a lot. We're on a scale that is less than 1% of the frequency spectrum. So what we have is 99+% that is unseen to us. So if you can imagine, we see less than 1% of what there is to see, what there is to experience. Now, what we can see and what we can experience seems quite a lot, but it's nothing in comparison to what we cannot see. And if we were to open ourselves up to see, then you would start having more and more experiences of the paranormal, the supernatural, where sometimes we just get a glimpse of what is always going on around us. You know, we're picking up on other people's thoughts, we're picking up on other people's ideas and believing them to be ours, because they're just there in the quantum field, ready for us to sort of connect with. And some of the, you know, a lot of the things that I've seen, a lot of things that I've experienced are just normal, but they seem not normal because we don't ordinarily see them or experience them. You know, we exist really within a 5 sense world, and unless it's within those 5 senses, we don't tend to know about it. You know, it is the 5 wounds of the Christ. And when you look at the Eye of Horus is telling you how to escape the 5 senses. So it's not just the eye, it's not just the pineal gland, it also represents the 5 senses plus the infinite expanse, which is the pupil. And it tells you how to escape the 5 senses. For people who live in a 5 sense world, in a 5 sense reality, and they only have one sphere, which is the material realm, the earth realm, then they are really, really boxed into that less than 1%, considerably less than 1%. But there's so much happening, you know, there's so much going on all around, all of the time. And sometimes we see it, sometimes we catch a glimpse of it, and sometimes we're completely oblivious. But that doesn't mean to say that it's not going on.
Wow. Let's talk about the heads at Easter Island. What do you think they're telling us? What is their purpose? Where did they come from?
All of the heads of Easter Island face east. So east is where the sun rises, which is illumination. When you look at the Orientals, that is in the east. So what you are doing with the word Oriental or Orient or orienteering is basically aligning yourself to the light, to the truth. So they all face east. Now, they are 33 feet tall from head to toe. 33 is important because there are 33 vertebrae of the spine. Now, the spine is Jacob's ladder. Now, the 33rd vertebrae is medically known as Atlas. Now, Atlantis means the island of Atlas. So the island of Atlantis is really the mind, the enlightened mind, which is above the vertebrae, which is Atlas. It is also the jet pillar of Osiris, which is the spine, which is the highway to enlightenment. So going back to what I was saying about the 5 senses, the heads of Easter Island, you can only see their head because they are telling you to concentrate on the divine mind and not a body of 5 senses, first of all. Now, when you actually look at the bodies themselves, you'll see, as with Gobleteke, their hands are pointing to their belly. What they're saying by indicating and pointing to the belly is that we are now rising ourselves from basically the pits, from the lower levels of knowledge, the lower levels of being, and we are raising ourselves to the divine mind. In Greek, this is the Herma, which again is like a statue with just a head. But yes, you can only see the heads of Easter Island because they are telling you to concentrate on your divine mind, not your body senses. And that is what they are telling us.
Wow. Wow. So let's jump to the crop circles. What is contained within them? People hear about crop circles and the beliefs put on them, the debunking, the whatever. What exactly are they, and what's the deal behind that, the mystery?
Crop circles are the same as hieroglyphs. They are the same as Nazca lines. They are a higher spiritual communication. Now, when you look at crop circles, which again, it is the sound of the environment which is creating the shape in the ground. Now, within that geometric shape, there are hidden messages, and they're known as diatonic ratios. What is happening is the rings of Saturn are transmitting some kind of message, some kind of frequency. Now, within 90 minutes, he's getting from the rings of Saturn to predominantly the UK. Why is it mainly around Stonehenge where these crop circles are? Stonehenge is aligned to the planet Saturn. So when Saturn, if you imagine the rings of Saturn are like guitar strings, and they are plucking different sounds from. Now, NASA have actually recorded these sounds. They have said that they are not natural, they are a message. Now, when I've listened to the sounds of the rings of Saturn, and I've listened to the sounds coming from a crop circle, it is the exact same pitch. So you have these messages coming from the rings of Saturn, transmitted down to Earth. Stonehenge is aligned to Saturn, and Stonehenge is also a crystalline aerial receiver. That is why these beautiful patterns are mainly around Stonehenge, because it's Stonehenge that is the receiving aerial for these transmissions. Now, within them are messages. They are extraterrestrial messages. And I say when I've listened to them, it's a high pitched sound. Now, I've actually lain inside a crop circle that has recently been formed, and you can actually feel the pulsating and vibrating energy coming from them.
Okay, so having said that, how should we be using, or should we be using those crop circles? Or what were they used for? I mean, is it a healing center? Is it a download center? Are they meant to be taken advantage of?
Well, they are different things depending upon their shape, depending upon the lettering and the language that is hidden within sound waves. Now, when you look at the great composers of the past, such as Mozart, etc., they used to put letters and sentences within the sound waves of their symphonies. And it was a way of communication. So what it is a way of communication, the same as the Nazca lines is a way of communication, the same as hieroglyphs are a symbolic image, which is the language of the masters. It is the language of the higher spiritual beings, symbolic images. So they contain messages, they contain genetic messages, they contain messages that connect to the soul. When you touch a hieroglyph, it speaks to the soul. It's not just a visual thing, it is a touch, it is a central thing. So they contain messages that, if deciphered, if you can extract the letters and the sentences from the sound waves, you can have a communication. And that is what it's all about.
And we have yet to decipher it.
Correct. I mean, yes, there are people who claim to get wooden planks and to create these beautiful shapes. And they say that they create them at night. Now, I've been in the fields around crop circles at night. Trust me, you are not going to create that shape with a plank of wood at night. You cannot see a thing. You cannot see anything at all. It's so dark. There's no street lamps. There's nothing. So you're not going to do it. And in any case, some of the people who have during the day created some of these shapes have said that they were almost taken over when these shapes were being created, so that they were being used as a vessel for these messages. So they are really higher developed messages. And as I say, if we could decipher them, then we would have a language, a communication, a higher spiritual communication. Somebody once said to me that they showed me a picture and they said, we created this crop circle. And I said to them, well, how did you encrypt the diatonic ratios? And they said, what do you mean? And I said, in that case, then you didn't put them there. Diatonic ratios are frequencies of messages of sound that are not natural sounds. So they are being encrypted within the double sound waves.
So what is the Göbekli Tepe and Lemuria, how are they all connected? What
Well,
is
Gobleteki actually means pot belly hill. So again, it's talking about the belly and raising yourself up, as were the heads of Easter Island, telling you. Now, when you look at some of the statues of Gobleteki, they also have their hands over their belly, as do the statues of Easter Island. So they are telling us that we are rising from the lower levels to the higher levels. Now, when you look at Lemuria, it is said that in Lemuria, you had snake people walking around. And when you look at the Sumerian scrolls and they talk about the Anunnaki, Anu in Egyptian is man, Naki means snake, so it's snake men. So what are snake men? Well, snakes go through a metamorphosis. They shed their skin, they rebirth themselves, they go through a metamorphosis. So the snake men are the wise adepts that within them, their serpent, their snake has risen, their kundalini has risen. So in other words, the snake men are the adepts, the initiates, the wise ones who have gone through initiations and they have risen their serpent power, their Christ within. So that is, Lemuria is really metaphorical of these people, the wise adepts who have gone through this snake-like metamorphosis. And that ties in again with the consciousness of Atlantis, what the pyramids are telling us. It all represents a higher mind and enlightenment, the wisdom of self, the rebirth of self. And that is what every single ancient culture is telling us and has been telling us. The same as if you read the likes of the Bible at its correct levels, it is also telling you the same thing.
and yet it's all so corrupted. How could you even know if I don't know? I think that things have been so meddled with and tampered with that how do we even know that what we have access to now is truly what was written? And how do
Yeah.
we know?
The one thing you can say is that the Bible that we've been given is not what was originally written, because the Church of Rome has taken pinnacle part out of and said, we have now authorized this version and this is what you must believe. So it is not the truth, but it's the half truth. It's the deception and the truth mixed as one. And I mean, the first mistake that people make is when you look at the 5 books of Moses, which make up the Jewish Torah, I guarantee now, if I was to go out and give a Bible to 1,000 people, 2,000, 3,000, they would open the Bible, read it, Genesis, from left to right, all the way to Deuteronomy, which is the 5 books of Moses, the Torah. Yet, in Hebrew, they read from right to left. So what you should be doing is reading from Deuteronomy to Genesis, the opposite way around, and then you get a completely different translation. You know, in the West, we write from left to right. So in other words, symbolically, we are going away from our spiritual center, which is the heart. We are going away from our heart. Now, the Jewish mystics, the rabbis, etc., write from right to left. So they are coming towards their spiritual center, their heart. So why would you read a Hebrew book from left to right when the Hebrews read from right to left? Because that is what we've been told to do.
Absolutely.
And what we've been told to do is not necessarily what we should do.
Absolutely. Gosh, you know, what a terrible web we're in some aspects. And I think the mistake that a lot of us make when we become aware that we are being manipulated, etc. The first thing they want to do is fight with weapons, which I don't think is going to amount to anything. That you have to fight with something that comes within us and connect it has won. I don't know if I'm explaining it right. There's no weapon that can knock all of this craziness down, but except the weapon that we possess within ourselves. Does that make sense to you?
It makes perfect sense. One of the most asked questions that I ever get asked is, what can we do? And my response in any guise, whether it's the current, what's going on in the world at the moment or anything, is it is extremely simple. It's so simple that it is one word, it has 2 letters, and it's pronounced no. That is how simple it is. So when someone is saying to you, you must do this, or you must comply, or you must believe this, no. You don't have to fight, you don't have to shout, you don't have to get a pitchfork and try and, have a ranch in Texas and fight the Rangers or anything. You just say no, and you don't comply. And you then realize really where the power lies. And that's not with presidents, that's not with prime ministers, that's not with, with the United Nations. It is with each and every individual is where the power lies. The problem we have is we give that power away to the people who wish to control us with it. And we say to them, I am yours, do what you want, impose these laws on me, take away my free will, take away my rights, take away everything, because I give my power to you. But in reality, they have no power, they have nothing, only what we give them and what we allow them to take from us. If every individual turns around and says, no, changes, the world changes.
It's crazy because I think people are afraid that to veer away from what they've been told, what they know, their comfort. The unknown is scary, but my attitude is already, I know what this is and I'm not liking it. So I'll take my chance on the unknown, because if this isn't working, there's got to be something else. There's something missing. There's something else out there. But I understand that a lot of people aren't like that. They're afraid of change. They're afraid to accept the fact that maybe they've been fooled and bamboozled and deceived, and they don't want to believe that.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it in those terms, if people were to realize this or want to realize this, then it means taking responsibility themselves. A lot of this earthly control is really the safety net of many people who don't want to take that responsibility. It's easier for them to say, you run my life for me, you control my life for me, so I don't have to. And that really has become they are happy within that security of control of the state. So those who wish to take that responsibility, and those who wish to say, I'm not accepting this, it's quite apparent that the world is in a mess. Our politicians, our priests, our monarchs, our gods have left us in a complete and utter mess. So why do we continue with the same systems? Surely that is just insane. It's like saying, well, I'll vote for Republican this time because the Democrats didn't do anything for me, but the Republicans, they'll change my life. In 4 years' time, well, the Republicans haven't done anything, but I'm going to vote for Democrats now because they promised they're going to change my life, and they don't. So next time I'm going to vote Republicans. I mean, that's insanity. It really, if you are continuing with a system that does not work, that is insane. If the system doesn't work, you have to change the system. But we have never changed the system. We have always kept to a system that has destroyed the planet. This planet is run for profit. It is absolute craziness that we're destroying a host planet for money. Look how powerful we are. We are not from this world. Our genetics are absolute royalty in the universe with the programming that we have. We are infinite potential. We are a fragment of the creator. So why are we letting a dollar bill control us? Because we are completely programmed. And we are programmed within a system that is ruining the planet that we live on. And it is time for a change. So I don't vote. I will never vote. No politician is worth my time because they don't serve me, they serve themselves. It is time for a change.
And so how do we get people together?
But
I
the
can't
reality,
even finish that question.
I know. The reality is people have to have a realization themselves.
Yeah.
They have to become adult. They have to become grown up. They have to take responsibility. You know, we are in a complete mess, but we have to take our responsibility for that mess as well, because we've allowed it to happen.
Right.
You know, we've allowed the wrong captains to steer our ship into the rocks. That is our fault. If someone turns around and they have little understanding of the world as it is, or who is running the world, or what their intentions are, that is their fault, because we live in an age of knowledge. We live in an age where you can find the answers relatively quickly, and not necessarily at the deepest levels. That takes hard work,
Right.
but you can get to a sufficient level to realize that there's something going on. And if you choose not to, that is down to you. You know, if you choose to watch the Super Bowl instead of doing some research into the world that you live, that is down to you. But people have to become mature. They have to grow. They have to become adults and realize that we are in a mess. We are going to come through this mess, but we have to take our responsibility for that, and we have to change that. You know, we're not going to have Christ on a white horse coming out of the clouds. We're not going to have UFOs landing on the lawn of the White House to save us. That isn't going to happen. You know, it is for us ourselves to save ourselves, and it is for us to become mature enough to accept the responsibility of the mistakes and the allowance of those mistakes. Luckily, there are more and more people beginning to realize, and there are more and more people joining in networks, and those networks are growing all over the world. There are still far too many people that are stuck in a 5 sense sphere, 5 sense reality and earth reality, which is a very, very low stage of development. But there are more and more people now who are graduating, and those people, you know, hopefully will tip the balance. And as I say, you know, it is written that we will come out of this, and things that are written, things that are determined from a higher force, they will happen, and it will happen. But, you know, we do have to take the responsibility for the mess that we're in.
So people, you're hearing that the Anunnaki is not coming down here to save you, and neither is Michael or anybody else. That you have to start within yourself. Because I think once a person, and I don't care if you're barely literate, you can find, I mean, there is nothing that separates you from your inner being. And it starts there. Starts getting in touch with who you are, to start becoming aware of where you are and what's around you and what's happening to you. And once people start that and start small, they don't have to jump into this I'm awake type thing now. But just look within first and question yourself. And that will lead to other things. It's not difficult. And sometimes I think that, the people who have the knowledge, they want to hold on to that knowledge. The people that are in power that know this knowledge don't want this knowledge out there. And so that's the struggle I think people would want to be in, is to releasing the knowledge that we need in order to flourish and survive as a species, to enjoy this place that we are for now, to learn as much as we possibly can on this planet, to figure out what our connections are to others, so that when our time comes, we're more likely to embrace it and the next step and where we go from here, if we've done what we're supposed to do as we are now, as we becoming, because we are becoming what we're supposed to be. We're not there yet. So I don't know. I think it's almost like the floodgates are open and there's so many things going on, and entities and portals being opened. And I mean, it's a lot for the mind to take. And I guess people have to step away and try to focus on one thing at a time, because the whole picture is kind of frightening. You understand what I'm trying to say? It's
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, the one thing that is obvious is everything is always taken us outside of ourselves. It is always the future. It's always the savior. It is always Armageddon. It is all, this is going to happen in the future. It is all always forever taken us outside of ourselves, because they know that the true power is inside our self. Self contains the word God. It is the God inside self. So if you are always chasing the carrot, then you are always forever looking outside of yourself, which is not where things are. And I think you were right in terms of saying focus. Now there are so many things going on, and there's no room in the inn. Well, that just means that the mind is full, nothing can come through. So we do need to focus. We do need to concentrate. I mean, I've said to people in the past, when they've talked about, well, what do you think about Enki and Enlil, the Anunnaki? What do you think of this God? What do you think of that God? Do you think this God is going to return? And I said, well, quite bluntly, forget gods, forget saviors. What relevance are they to my life, really? They are of no relevance to my life. All gods have ever brought is chaos. All people who worship these gods have caused chaos. Now we have religions across the world that are killing each other and arguing over lies. Now that they are arguing within circles of falsity. What relevance are these gods to me? They are no relevant. What is relevant to me is creating the best possible life that I can create for myself whilst I'm in this environment, whilst I'm in this captivity. And if I can create the best life that I can create for me through the focus of the mind, which is the road to self-mastery, focusing and concentrating on the mind, then I can create a better reality for myself. And when you operate within that neutral ground, then you are actually overcoming those four elements. You are overcoming duality. You're not spending time in any of the extreme polarities. You're not caught in the quicksand of negativity. You're not caught in the airy-fairy of light. You are taking the middle ground, which is the path of least resistance. And you are operating in and out of those places, but you are coming back to a place of non-duality. So forget the gods. The times of worshiping gods should have been gone many hundreds, many thousands of years ago. We haven't advanced that much, that we're still believing the same things that we believed thousands of years ago. You know, it's about time now. Again, those systems haven't worked. So why do we still insist on having those systems, which is clearly a very, very low case of maturity that we find ourselves in? And we need to change that. The only ones that are going to change that is ourselves. And that is where the power really is.
Yeah. No, all people have to do is believe that the power is within us. That the power is within us. Even in the Bible, it says, Jesus was telling them that the kingdom of heaven was within you. And to me, that's important to try to, if you don't understand anything else, if you don't concentrate on anything else, to try and concentrate on what that meant.
Well, all of these, a lot of these sayings, you see, are referring to the self, because there's always a microcosm, macrocosm, you know, as above, so below, as below, so above. There's always whatever's happening in the universe, because we are a miniature universe, it is happening within us. So when you talk about the kingdom of heaven is within, the kingdom of heaven is really the head, the temple, the house of God. So when we are in the state of heaven within, we are in an enlightened state. We are in an advanced state of awareness, which is what the Christ really is. So when you do reach heaven, the promised land of the Lamb promised, the Golgotha, which is the skull, the place of skulls, it is the place where we receive the light to become enlightened. So the kingdom of heaven is the higher mind, the divine mind, that can have knowledge of what's going on. And that is really what they're telling us. And there are certain ways in which to activate that knowledge. It can be just a want to learn, to do research, to look into things, and that will naturally increase your knowledge. And when you increase your knowledge, you are entering into the kingdom of heaven within, which is the higher mind. And that is really what that Christ statement was telling us.
So tell me this, where does the Spirit, who do you or what do you see as the Holy Spirit? The light in that threesome? Where's the Spirit of God, or the God like?
Spirit means breath. So the Holy Spirit is the holy breath of creation. And we're told that God created by breath. Now, when you look at the likes of Amun-Ra of Egypt, who they believe is a creator God, Amun-Ra created by breath. In the Anunnaki story, you have Enlil, who is the god of breath, wind. So the Holy Spirit is the holy breath of creation, the air. Air relates to knowledge. So when you look at, when you look at Christ being the bread or the breath of life, when the yeast, when you're making bread, the yeast takes on the oxygen. And when it does so, it gives, or it mimics and replicates the respiratory system of the body. So that is the bread of life, that is the breath of life. Now, when you look at different things that mean breath, expire, the church expire, means breath. When you expire, it means to stop breathing. When you conspire, as in conspiracy, it means to breathe harmoniously, to breathe as one. So we have all of these different words. Spire, spirit, means breath. So that is the Holy Spirit.
Wow.
Don't forget as well, tribe. The tribe of Judah, from where Christ comes, tribe relates to the spirit of life. the breath of life. And you do that in yoga through the breath, and you will notice that the gigantic sphinx has no nose. You don't breathe through the nose, through the lion's breath of yoga, you breathe through the mouth.
So, what about your experiences with extraterrestrials, otherworldly beings? Can you share a bit of that?
Yeah, there's been a number of them in different guises. But there's been communications telepathically, which again, you know, when you look at crop circles and astral lines, that they are higher spiritual communication acoustically and geometrically. So some of my interactions have been information. Some of my interactions have been face-to-face encounters. Some of my encounters have been in the astral realm in lucid dreaming, where they've come through mirrors into this realm. Some of them have been through telepathic instructions to go to a certain place at a certain time. Like if you've ever seen the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where the cast of that movie keep getting this image that they keep carving this mountain, and they can't understand what it is. But what it is really is an invite to a certain place at a certain time, and that has happened to me and 3 friends. Some of those interactions have just literally been to see advanced craft in the skies day and night. Some of those interactions has been to seeing them enter in this world through portals. Some of those interactions have been in complete dense forestry, pitch black forestry, and seeing beautiful, pure white light just appear in the middle of the trees. In fact, so bright that you couldn't look into it, but it to then just disappear. And when you look back at photographs, you can see lots and lots of orbs and things going into this light. So a lot of my action things have been seeing, meeting, hearing, things popping into my head. I now get a lot of quantum equations just appear in my head that are talking about angular velocity and different quantum physics. I've also seen and been allowed to see advanced technology that has come into my house, into my room, my office, in a Sifu sphere. And inside that sphere, there was advanced rotating technology. And I spoke to a friend of mine in the States who is really a scientific mechanic or whatever, and he's telling me that he's probably about 300 or 400 years in advance of what we know when I described to him what I've seen. So there's been a lot and lots of encounters of different kinds, seeing different craft, seeing them come into this world, standing next to people not of this world, having them appear to me in lucid dreams and have a communication with them, being invited to certain places, and being given lots and lots of secret information in relation to some of this information that needs to come into the world now. So it's been quite an interesting couple of years in terms of what's happening.
How did you get the courage? You know, like I look on my own experiences, and first of all, you don't really want to tell people. Secondly, you rarely understand what's going on. And third, you got to shift through all of the misinformation that you've received and all the persecution that you're afraid to receive in order to share it or accept that it's happened. How did you get to the point where you were comfortable and so matter of fact explain it?
For me, I am of the kind of mindset that if I've seen something and I've experienced something, then for me, I know it's real. I know it's personal. And I'm not afraid to stand in front of anybody and say what I've seen and what I've experienced. And I really, really do not mind, or I'm not concerned if the whole room was to laugh at me, because I know what I've seen, I know what I've experienced. For me, you have to choose your audience. You know, you have to speak to people who are ready to hear what you have to say. You know, and my first, I'd had a sort of a glimpse of a few things before, but my true awakening in 2009 was remote viewing back in the past, and conscious entanglement, scientific terms. Remote viewing, I went back to the scene of a crime 100 odd years before my time, and I remember vividly to this day what I saw and what I brought back to this world with me. So I've had visitations from the past who come into my time event, into their future, and I've interacted with these things. I'm not afraid to sit in front of anybody and say what I've seen and what I've experienced. If they choose not to believe that, that is up to them. You know, what I was told, and you quite rightly said, you know, when you first experience these things, you haven't got a clue what it is, what it means, how it can happen. And that happened to me, and it took a long time, a number of years, for me to fully understand what had happened, and then have the evidence, scientifically and otherwise, to prove what had happened. Now, I was told the reason that I've had so many experiences is you have to, in order to have more credibility when you are talking about it and you are trying to help people who are experiencing, it's quite essential or quite important to have actually experienced it yourself. You know, there are so many people on the circuit who are speaking about these things, but they've never ever experienced anything. Now, I came up with a phrase to simplify that message, and that phrase for me was, you can't talk about wine without first having knowledge of the grape. That's how I put it into understandable terms for me. So having strange messages before I go on vacation to Egypt in 2010, even just a couple of weeks ago, having another strange message that coincided with that message 11 years ago, talking about the Sphinx wants to give me some information. It was a strange message in 2010 that said the same thing, and independently a couple of weeks ago, somebody else had a message of the same vein for me relating to the knowledge of the Sphinx and how it wanted to give that information to me. So there's a lot of things, a lot of synchronicities, you know, it's not just one isolated thing. There are many different component parts to the information that is coming. So I've experienced it. I now understand what I've experienced, and I'm now able to take that forward to help others who may be struggling to understand what is happening to them. And that is the reason that I've experienced so much in the last 10, 11, 12 years.
I'm in total agreement. And I've finally started to recognize that. So we have a few minutes left. What would you tell people out there who are interested but don't know where to start? What is the first thing that you would tell them to do to get set on their journey?
I guess the first thing is really to have the want to, you know, have the want to expand themselves, have the want and the intent to look into things. The same with anything really. You can read books, you can look on the internet, you know, that will take you to a certain level. But I always found that, you know, if I want to find something out and I go to a Google search and I type it in, there's lots and lots of answers to my question, but none of them ever felt fulfilling to me. If it's so easy to come across, it is not the deepest level of truth. A lot of my information comes from sitting there in silence, asking questions, and see what answer comes in. Because when you start opening yourself up, when you give yourself the space in which for things to speak to you, then they will speak to you either through feelings, either through information. Sometimes in my head, if you imagine in the same instant, I get a question and the answer in the same instant. Sometimes I will get the answer as an image. So these are things that are able to come through to you when you listen, when you become silent, because within the silence there is everything. And you just give yourself the time just to sit down and listen. And there'll be some great information, but really anybody who turns around and says, I want to know, then eventually they will know. If I want to know the answer to something and I can't find the answer, I will go to bed and I will say, by tomorrow morning, I want the answer to this question. And I guarantee that every single time that I have said that, within the first hour or two of the next day, I have found the answer. Because we are always in communication with everything else. You know, thoughts, the quantum field, everything is all around us that contains every single thread of information that you could ever possibly need.
Absolutely.
It's a case of, you know, if I get my cell phone and my cell phone is switched off, then I'm not going to get any calls. If I switch it on, then it's helping for people to communicate and to connect with me. And that is the same as the body. That is the same as the mind. That is the same as every single layer of your vessel. It's just a case of opening yourself up and letting it come in and having that desire to want the truth, to want the answers, which will surely come when you ask for them.
Michael, you have got to come. You have got to come back again. Tell people where they can find you. You do one-on-ones and stuff, right?
I do. The best place to find me, I'm on YouTube, I'm on Facebook, I'm on all of these platforms, but the central place is really my website where all of these things are, which is www.michael-feeley.com. And from there, there's many different paths in which to, you know, there's a contact page, there's all different things, and everything you could ever want is on that website.
And I will post it again. I posted it already, I think, twice on my page and my broadcast page. I will post it again. And I suggest to people that they actually go to the site and look around. There's so much information there. And his interviews, his YouTube channel. Start here. Start with him right now, because it is time. You won't. I don't believe you will just one day go to bed and wake up the next day and say you're woke with all the answers. There's things that you need to do, and like you said, it's first starting with that quiet time and going inside. And it works. It really, truly works. It leads you on a path of discovery. And with that, I know it's late where you are, Michael, and I want to thank you so much for staying up to do this interview with me. I really appreciate it, and I wish you all the luck, and I want to talk to you again and again and again and again and again.
And anytime at all, you just tell me and I'll be here.
Just lovely, truly. I'm sitting here trying to keep my mouth from hitting the floor, you know, blubbering on myself, because there's things that you've said that sparked something within me that I was aware of but didn't know how to put it into words. And there's so much new information that you brought to me and the listeners. So I will definitely be keeping in touch and dropping you notes and questions. And with that, everybody, I'm going to say good night. Reverend Ed's show should be coming up next. And you all have a wonderful weekend and stay safe. And don't forget your quiet time. And with that, I'm going to say good night.